others. The kind of crime intended to be included as especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel is one accompanied by additional acts that show that the crime was conscienceless or pitiless and was unnecessarily tortious to IS. 4. The first-degree murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. Cold means the murder was the product of calm and cool reflection. Calculated means having a careful plan or prearranged design to commit murder. A killing is premeditated if it occurs after the defendant consciously decides to kill. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. However, in order for this aggravating factor to apply, a heightened level of premeditation demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection is required. A pretense of moral or legal justification is any claim of justification or excuse that, though insufficient to reduce the crime of murder, nevertheless rebuts the otherwise cold, calculated, or premeditated nature of the murder. The unborn child of IS was a person less than 12 years of age. That's for number 5. This only applies to count 2. Number 6. IS was particularly vulnerable because Johnathan Quiles stood in a position of familial or custodial authority over IS. This applies to count 1. The unborn child of IS was particularly vulnerable because Johnathan Quiles stood in a position of familial or custodial authority over the unborn child of IS. This applies to count 2. Once the state has presented evidence of the existing of aggravating factors, victim impact evidence may be presented. Such evidence is only presented to demonstrate the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the loss to the community by the victim's death. However, victim impact evidence must not be considered by you as an aggravating factor. A mitigating circumstance can be anything that might indicate the death penalty is not appropriate for the defendant. It is not limited to the facts surrounding the crime. In other words, a mitigating circumstance may include any aspect of the defendant's character, background, or life, or any circumstance of the offense that may indicate the death penalty is not an appropriate sentence in this case. Whether a mitigating circumstance has been proven is an individual judgment by each juror. A mitigating circumstance need not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but must be proven by the greater weight of the evidence. After the evidence has been presented, the attorneys will have the opportunity to make their closing arguments. Following the closing arguments by the attorneys, the court will instruct you on the law. After the final instructions are given, the alternate jurors will be released and you will begin your deliberations. You should not form any definite or fixed opinion until you have heard all the evidence, the argument of the lawyers, and my instructions on the law. Until that time, you should not discuss this case among yourselves. Your decision must be based solely on the evidence or lack of evidence and the law. During the penalty phase, the court will take breaks and you are permitted to separate and go about your personal affairs. During these breaks, you must not discuss the case with anyone, nor permit anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence about the case, tell them that you're on the jury and ask that person to stop. If that person persists, leave that person at once and immediately report the matter to the bailiff, who will advise me. All cell phones, computers, tablets, or other types of electronic devices must be turned off while you are in the courtroom. Turned off means that the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in a silent or vibrating mode. You may use these devices during breaks.
Everybody's going to turn off those cell phones as they're getting ready to hear the opening statements. Don't go anywhere. It's about